When Jaden's parents hired a new nanny, she seemed the epitome of caring and kindness. But there was something dark behind Ms. Karen's smile. What is she hiding, and how can her plan destroy their family? Will Jaden be able to stop her before it's too late? Leave a comment where you watch this video and don't forget to subscribe. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the spacious home where 10-year-old Jaden Matthews lived with his parents and younger sister Sophia. The Matthews family was well off, with a successful business that kept Jaden's parents constantly busy. Their life had always been comfortable, if not a bit hectic. Jaden, a quiet and observant boy, had grown used to his parents' frequent absences and the steady rotation of nannies who came to help take care of him and Sophia. Yet, there was something different about the new nanny, Miss Karen. She had arrived just a week ago, a smiling white woman in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed and full of warmth when she first greeted Jaden and his family. To his parents, Miss Karen was a godsend, someone they could trust with their children while they focused on their demanding business. But to Jaden, there was something unsettling about her. At first, he couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the uneasiness was there, lingering in the back of his mind like a shadow. As his parents explained to him and Sophia that Miss Karen would be staying with them for the foreseeable future, Jaden couldn't help but notice the way her eyes darted around the house, quickly taking in the details. The elegant furniture, the expensive artwork on the walls, the little touches of wealth scattered throughout their home. He saw her smile widen as she spoke with his parents, and for a moment her gaze landed on him. There was something cold behind her eyes, a flicker of something that didn't match the warm tone of her voice. But Jaden was a thoughtful boy. He kept his observations to himself, choosing to wait and see. After all, she hadn't done anything wrong, not yet. Miss Karen quickly settled into her role, taking over the daily routines of the household. She prepared meals, took Sophia to and from school, and helped Jaden with his homework when his parents were busy. She even managed to earn Sophia's trust quickly, making little games out of everyday tasks, and the 6-year-old girl soon became fond of her. Jaden, however, kept his distance. He noticed how Miss Karen's behavior shifted depending on who was around. When his parents were home, she was cheerful and engaging, always complimenting them on their home and their children. But when it was just him and Sophia, her demeanor cooled. She became distant, efficient, as if her warm facade had been switched off. One afternoon, about a week after Miss Karen's arrival, Jaden found himself sitting at the dining table, finishing up his homework while Miss Karen prepared dinner in the kitchen. His parents weren't due back for another few hours, and Sophia was playing in the living room. As he scribbled the last of his math problems, Jaden heard Miss Karen speaking softly in the kitchen. Curiosity piqued, he set down his pencil and quietly made his way to the door. She was on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "Yes, I've got everything under control," she was saying. "The house is perfect, and the family, well, they trust me completely. It won't be long now." Jaden froze, his heart pounding in his chest. What was she talking about? He couldn't quite hear the other side of the conversation, but the tone of her voice sent a chill down his spine. "No, don't worry," Miss Karen continued, glancing over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "They have no idea. I'll have access to everything soon enough." Jaden backed away quietly, careful not to make any noise. He returned to his seat at the dining table, his mind racing. What was she planning? Who was she talking to? And what did she mean by access to everything? Later that evening, after his parents returned home, Jaden debated whether or not to tell them about what he had overheard. But when he saw how relaxed and happy his parents seemed, he hesitated. They had been under a lot of stress lately with work, and he didn't want to add to their worries. Besides, what if he was wrong? What if Miss Karen was just talking about something unrelated to their family? He had no proof, only a feeling. So, Jaden decided to keep quiet, at least for now. The following days only deepened his unease. Miss Karen seemed to be everywhere, always watching, always listening. She kept asking his parents questions about their work, about their schedule, and even about their finances. His parents didn't seem to mind. In fact, they welcomed her interest, appreciating how involved she seemed. But to Jaden, it felt like she was digging for information, trying to learn more than she should. One morning, while his parents were out at a meeting, Jaden found himself alone in the house with Miss Karen. Sophia was at school, and he had a day off from his classes. He wandered into the living room thinking he might watch TV, when he noticed something odd. Miss Karen was sitting at the large mahogany desk in his father's study, the computer open in front of her. She wasn't supposed to be in there. His parents had always told him that the study was off limits to everyone except them. Jaden crept closer, careful to stay out of sight. He peeked through the crack in the door and saw Miss Karen scrolling through something on the screen. Files, documents, accounts. His father's private business files. She was reading them, taking notes on a small notepad beside her. Jaden's heart raced. He had to do something. He couldn't just stand there and watch her snoop through his father's things. But he was only 10, and she was an adult. What if she caught him spying on her? What if she lied to his parents and turned them against him? He needed a plan, and he needed proof. Over the next few days, Jaden began to keep a close eye on Miss Karen. He started making notes of his own, writing down every suspicious thing she did or said. He watched as she continued to ask his parents questions about their assets, their wills, and their insurance policies. She was always careful, framing her questions as casual curiosity, but Jaden could see through her act. One evening, when Miss Karen left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, Jaden seized the opportunity. He quickly unlocked it. He had seen her enter the code a few times and scrolled through her messages. His stomach dropped as he read the conversations she had been having with someone named John. "Almost there," one message said. "Just a little more time and I'll have full access." "Good," John had replied. "Once you have it, we'll move fast. Make sure there are no mistakes." Jaden's hands shook as he quickly took screenshots of the messages and sent them to his own phone. This was the proof he needed. Miss Karen wasn't who she said she was. She was planning something big, something dangerous, and he had to stop her. But how? His parents were completely taken in by her. They wouldn't believe him without solid evidence, and even then, Miss Karen had charmed them so thoroughly that they might think he was just making things up. He couldn't confront her directly. She was too clever, too calculating. No, he had to be smart about this. He had to gather more evidence, enough to leave no doubt in his parents' minds that Miss Karen was not the person they thought she was. And so, Jaden made a decision. He would keep watching, keep gathering proof, and when the time was right, he would expose Miss Karen for who she really was. He had to. His family's safety depended on it. For now, he would bide his time, playing the role of the quiet, obedient child while keeping his eyes and ears open. He would be ready when the moment came. As Jaden sat in his room that night, looking over the screenshots on his phone, he felt a mixture of fear and determination. He didn't know how long it would take, or what Miss Karen's exact plan was, but he knew one thing for sure. He would not let her get away with it. The next few weeks would test him in ways he had never imagined, but Jaden was ready. Jaden sat at his desk, staring at the screenshots on his phone, his mind racing. Every time he looked at the messages between Miss Karen and this mysterious John, he felt a growing sense of dread. His instincts were screaming at him that something was terribly wrong. Miss Karen wasn't just interested in his family's finances. She had a plan, and whatever it was big. He knew he couldn't sit idly by. The risk was too great. His parents had to know what was happening, but he also knew they wouldn't believe him without hard evidence. They were far too charmed by Miss Karen, trusting her completely to manage the house and look after him and Sophia. But Jaden was determined to change that, and the only way to do so was to gather more information, more proof that Miss Karen wasn't who she pretended to be. The next few days passed in a haze of tension. Jaden kept his distance from Miss Karen, watching her every move, trying to act as if nothing was wrong. He pretended to be the same quiet, obedient boy she was used to, but in reality, his mind was racing. He needed to figure out a way to collect more evidence without tipping her off that he was on to her. Miss Karen, for her part, seemed as pleasant as ever, playing the role of the caring, attentive nanny when his parents were around. She continued to charm them with her gentle demeanor and seemingly genuine concern for their family. Jaden noticed how she'd drop subtle compliments, telling his mom how lucky she was to have such a wonderful family, or mentioning to his dad how much she admired his success. But when his parents weren't around, that warmth would vanish. Miss Karen's eyes would harden, her tone would become cold, and Jaden would feel the sharpness of her true personality. She never did anything overtly cruel in front of Sophia, but Jaden could sense the tension building, as if she was waiting for the right moment to make her move. One afternoon, Jaden was sitting in the living room with his little sister Sophia, watching cartoons. Miss Karen was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared a snack for them. Jaden's thoughts were elsewhere, his mind racing with ideas of how to get more proof of her deception. He knew she had to be hiding something that would confirm his suspicions once and for all. "Jaden?" Sophia's soft voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Yeah?" he asked, turning to look at his sister. "Why don't you like Miss Karen?" Sophia's innocent question took him by surprise. He hadn't realized how obvious his discomfort had become. Jaden hesitated, unsure of how to answer without scaring his little sister. "It's not that I don't like her," he said carefully. "I just don't trust her." Sophia tilted her head, her big brown eyes filled with confusion. "But she's nice to me. She always makes my favorite snacks and helps me with my homework." Jaden sighed. Sophia was too young to understand what he had discovered, and he didn't want to worry her. But he also knew he had to protect her. "Just be careful around her, okay?" he said gently. "Don't tell her too much about Mom and Dad. If she asks you any questions, tell me first." Sophia frowned but nodded. "Okay, Jaden. I'll tell you." Before Jaden could say anything else, Miss Karen appeared in the doorway, holding a tray of cookies and milk. "Here we go," she said with a bright smile, setting the tray down on the coffee table. "Your favorite, Sophia." "Thanks, Miss Karen," Sophia beamed, immediately grabbing a cookie. Miss Karen turned to Jaden, her smile never faltering, but there was something in her eyes that made his skin crawl. "Aren't you going to have one, Jaden?" she asked sweetly. Jaden shook his head. "No thanks," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Miss Karen's smile tightened, but she said nothing. She stood there for a moment longer, watching him, before turning and walking back into the kitchen. Jaden could feel her eyes on him the entire time. He had to do something. He couldn't let Miss Karen continue manipulating his family. He needed to act, and soon. Later that evening, after his parents had come home and Miss Karen had retreated to her room for the night, Jaden made his move. He waited until the house was quiet, everyone settled into their routines. His parents were in their bedroom catching up on work, and Sophia was fast asleep. Jaden crept down the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what he was about to do was risky, but he couldn't let fear stop him. He had seen Miss Karen enter a password on her phone before, and he hoped it would work on her laptop as well. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He slipped into the room where Miss Karen kept her things, being careful not to make any noise. The door was slightly ajar, and the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminated the otherwise dark room. Jaden's heart raced as he approached the desk where her laptop sat, the screen still unlocked. This was his chance. He quickly began searching through her files, his fingers trembling as he clicked through folders and documents. Most of it looked normal, schedules, notes, reminders. But then he found it, a folder labeled Assets. Jaden clicked on it, and his eyes widened as a series of documents appeared on the screen. Financial statements, account balances, even documents related to his family's home and business. Miss Karen had been collecting information about his parents' finances for months. But that wasn't all. There was a second folder, one labeled John. Jaden's stomach churned as he opened it, revealing a long series of emails between Miss Karen and the man named John. They were planning something big, something that involved taking control of his family's assets once she had enough information. "Just a little more time," one email from Miss Karen read. "I'm almost there. Soon, they'll trust me completely, and we can make our move." Jaden quickly took screenshots of everything, sending them to his phone for safekeeping. His heart raced as he copied the files, knowing this was the proof he needed to show his parents. But just as he was about to close the laptop, he heard a noise behind him. "Jaden?" Miss Karen's voice was cold, and Jaden's blood ran cold. He turned slowly, his eyes widening in fear as he saw her standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, a look of fury etched across her face. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, stepping closer to him. Jaden's mind raced. He couldn't let her know what he had found. "I was just looking for a game to play," he stammered, trying to sound innocent. Miss Karen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Jaden thought she might not believe him. But then she smiled, a slow, menacing smile that made his skin crawl. "You shouldn't be in here," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "You know your parents wouldn't like it if they found out you were snooping around in my things." Jaden swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't let her know what he had discovered. He had to get out of there, fast. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, backing away from the laptop. "I didn't mean to." Miss Karen stepped closer, her smile never faltering. "It's okay, Jaden," she said softly. "But let's not make a habit of this, all right? I wouldn't want you to get into trouble." Jaden nodded quickly, his mind racing as he edged toward the door. "I won't," he promised, forcing a smile. "I'll go now." As soon as he was out of the room, he bolted down the hallway and into his bedroom, slamming the door behind him. His heart was racing, his hands shaking as he collapsed onto his bed. Miss Karen knew. She had caught him, and now she knew he was onto her. But she didn't know everything. She didn't know he had the proof he needed to expose her. Jaden pulled out his phone and stared at the screenshots, feeling a mix of fear and determination. He couldn't back down now. He had to stop her before it was too late. The next morning, Jaden woke up with a new sense of purpose. He had the evidence he needed, and now it was time to show his parents the truth. But as he made his way downstairs, he was greeted by an unsettling sight. Miss Karen was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his parents, her usual smile plastered on her face. But something was different. There was a tension in the air, an undercurrent of unease that made Jaden's stomach turn. "Morning, Jaden," his mother said cheerfully, but there was something off in her tone. Jaden's heart sank. Miss Karen had gotten to them first. Jaden stood frozen at the entrance of the kitchen, his eyes darting between Miss Karen and his parents. The smile on her face seemed as fixed as ever, but he could sense a shift, something dark beneath the surface. His parents, however, appeared completely relaxed, sipping their morning coffee as though nothing had changed. Jaden's mind raced. He had the proof, the evidence he needed to expose Miss Karen, but now it seemed she had gotten ahead of him. "Morning, buddy," his father said with a smile, oblivious to the tension Jaden felt. "Everything okay?" Jaden forced a nod, his throat dry. "Yeah, just woke up." "Good morning, Jaden," Miss Karen chimed in with her usual sugary tone, though her eyes were fixed on him with a cold intensity. "I hope you slept well." "Yeah," Jaden mumbled, avoiding her gaze. He felt the weight of the phone in his pocket, knowing it held the evidence that could expose her lies. But something in Miss Karen's demeanor today made him uneasy. She was watching him closely, too closely. She knew he had been in her room, and she wasn't going to let him make the next move easily. "Why don't you grab some breakfast?" his mom suggested, looking up from her laptop. "You've got a big day ahead. Miss Karen said she's taking you and Sophia to the park later. Doesn't that sound nice?" Jaden's heart skipped a beat. "The park?" He couldn't hide the suspicion in his voice. "Yes, dear," Miss Karen replied smoothly, her smile widening. "I thought it would be a fun way to spend the afternoon. We can have a little picnic, and you and Sophia can play while I keep an eye on you." Jaden forced a weak smile. Sounds fun. Inside, he felt a growing sense of dread. The park? Miss Karen was trying to play the perfect nanny, all while knowing what he had discovered. She was pretending everything was normal, but he could feel her manipulation closing in around him. He had to get to his parents, had to show them what he'd found before it was too late. He made his way to the pantry, grabbing a box of cereal while trying to think of a plan. Miss Karen wasn't going to give him much time. She was trying to control the situation, and he couldn't let her. As he poured milk into his bowl, he cast a quick glance at his parents. They were completely unaware of the danger. His father was flipping through a newspaper, and his mother was typing away at her laptop. Jaden's stomach twisted in knots. How could he convince them that the woman they trusted was a fraud? How could he show them the truth without Miss Karen stopping him? He sat down at the table and started to eat, though his appetite was non-existent. Miss Karen's gaze remained on him, studying his every move. It was as if she knew he was planning something. He needed to be careful. After a few minutes of silent tension, Jaden's mom stood up and stretched. "All right, I've got a call with a client in about an hour," she said, looking at her husband. "And then we'll need to head to the office." Jaden's heart sank. His parents were leaving again. They'd be gone all day, and that meant he'd be alone with Miss Karen and Sophia. He had no idea what Miss Karen was planning, but he couldn't shake the feeling that today was a pivotal moment. His dad stood up as well, stretching his arms. "Yeah, I've got to prep for that big presentation next week. Karen, are you sure you've got everything under control today?" Miss Karen smiled, as sweet and composed as ever. "Of course, Mr. Matthews. I'll take excellent care of the kids. You two focus on your work." Jaden swallowed hard. His window of opportunity was closing. His parents were about to leave, and he still hadn't figured out how to tell them the truth. Every instinct told him he couldn't let them go without showing them the screenshots on his phone, but Miss Karen was watching him like a hawk. He needed to be smart. As his parents started gathering their things, Jaden realized he had no choice but to take a risk. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "Mom, Dad, can I show you something real quick?" His voice sounded shaky, and he hated how nervous he felt, but he had to push through it. Both of his parents paused and looked at him, curious. "What's up, buddy?" his dad asked, his brow furrowing slightly. Jaden reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling as he pulled out his phone. "It's something important. I really need to talk to you. Alone." At that moment, Miss Karen's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Jaden caught the subtle shift in her expression, but his parents didn't notice. "Jaden, what is it?" his mom asked, a hint of concern creeping into her voice. Before Jaden could answer, Miss Karen stepped in. "I'm sure whatever it is can wait until later, Jaden," she said smoothly, her voice oozing false concern. "Your parents have a busy day ahead, and you don't want to distract them, do you?" Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. She was trying to stop him. She knew what he was about to do, and she was trying to derail it. "No, it can't wait," Jaden said firmly, summoning all the courage he could. "I really need to show you something right now." His parents exchanged glances, clearly sensing the tension between him and Miss Karen. His mom stepped forward, her face softening. "Jaden, what's going on? You seem upset." Before Jaden could respond, Miss Karen moved closer, her tone gentle but authoritative. "Jaden, I understand you're feeling anxious, but we can talk about whatever's bothering you after your parents leave. Let's not cause any unnecessary stress this morning, okay?" Jaden's pulse quickened. She was trying to manipulate him in front of his parents, trying to make it seem like he was overreacting. He couldn't let her win. "No," Jaden blurted out, louder than he intended. His parents looked startled, and Miss Karen's mask of calm slipped just for a second, revealing a flash of anger in her eyes. His dad raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by Jaden's outburst. "Jaden, what's this about?" Jaden took a deep breath. "It's about Miss Karen," he said, his voice steady now. "She's not who you think she is." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. His mom and dad stared at him, confused, while Miss Karen's smile remained frozen on her face, though her eyes had gone cold. "Jaden," his mother said slowly, "what are you talking about?" Jaden didn't hesitate. He unlocked his phone and opened the folder with the screenshots he had taken of Miss Karen's messages. "I found these on her phone," he said, handing his phone to his dad. "She's been talking to someone about our family. She's been spying on us." His dad looked down at the phone, his face slowly turning from confusion to disbelief as he scrolled through the screenshots. His mom leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she read the messages. Miss Karen's smile finally disappeared. "I can explain," she said quickly, stepping toward them. "This is a misunderstanding. Jaden must have misinterpreted something. I would never—" "Misinterpreted?" Jaden's voice was rising now. "I saw you. I heard you talking to someone about taking control of our family's money. You've been spying on us since you got here." His mom's face went pale, and his dad looked up from the phone, his expression one of shock. "Karen, what is this?" Miss Karen's eyes darted between Jaden and his parents. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I was just—" "It's exactly what it looks like," Jaden interrupted. "She's a fraud. She's been lying to you since the day she arrived." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Jaden's words hung in the air, and his parents seemed to be struggling to process what they were seeing. Miss Karen's calm facade had cracked, and Jaden could see the panic in her eyes. Finally, his dad spoke. "Karen," he said, his voice cold now, "I think you need to leave. We'll be contacting the police." Miss Karen's face twisted into something ugly. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "I've done nothing wrong." "You've done plenty wrong," Jaden shot back, "and you're not going to get away with it." His dad stood up, his expression hard. "Karen, leave. Now." For a moment, Miss Karen stood frozen, her face pale with anger. But then, without another word, she turned and stormed out of the kitchen. Jaden could hear the front door slam behind her, and the house fell into an uneasy silence. Jaden's parents looked at him, still stunned by everything that had just happened. His mom knelt down in front of him, her voice soft and trembling. "Jaden, how did you know?" Tears stung the corners of Jaden's eyes, but he held them back. "I overheard her," he said quietly, "and I saw her going through Dad's files. I knew something wasn't right, so I started paying attention." His dad sat back down at the table, shaking his head. "I can't believe we didn't see it." Jaden's mom pulled him into a hug, her voice filled with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Jaden. We should have listened to you." Jaden hugged her back, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. He had stopped Miss Karen, but the damage she had done to their trust would take time to heal. For now, though, they were safe. But as Jaden sat with his family, his mind couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Miss Karen was gone, but the man named John was still out there. And Jaden knew that someone like Miss Karen wouldn't just give up so easily. The danger was far from over. In the days following Miss Karen's abrupt departure, the house felt strangely empty. The usual sounds of her moving about, cleaning, or talking to Sophia were gone, leaving a hollow silence in her wake. Jaden had expected to feel a sense of victory, a triumphant relief after exposing her lies and protecting his family, but instead, an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. Something didn't sit right. Miss Karen was gone, yes, but the threat she posed hadn't disappeared with her. There was still the matter of John. Jaden knew from the messages he had found that Miss Karen wasn't working alone. John, whoever he was, had been helping her plan something big. Even though his parents had fired Miss Karen and reported her suspicious activity to the police, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that this man, John, was still out there, waiting to make his move. Miss Karen had fled without a fight, and that scared him more than if she had confronted them. She had left too easily, too calmly, as if she knew it wasn't over yet. One evening, a few days after Miss Karen's departure, Jaden sat at the dinner table with his parents and Sophia. His mom and dad were talking about work, as usual, but there was an underlying tension in the air. His mom kept glancing toward the front door, and his dad's eyes darted to his phone every few minutes, as though they were waiting for something, or someone. Jaden couldn't take it anymore. "Do you think she'll come back?" he asked suddenly, his voice breaking the uneasy silence. His parents stopped talking and looked at him. His mom's face softened, and his dad set his fork down, sighing heavily. "I don't think so, Jaden," his dad said, trying to sound reassuring. "The police are looking into her background. They'll find her, and if she's guilty of what we think she is, they'll deal with her." Jaden didn't feel reassured. "But what about John? he asked, his eyes flicking between his parents. She wasn't working alone. What if he comes after us? His mom leaned forward, reaching out to take his hand. Jaden, sweetheart, you don't need to worry about that. We've alerted the police to everything you found. They'll handle it. You've already done so much, more than we ever could have asked of you. Jaden squeezed her hand, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in danger. He wanted to believe his parents, wanted to trust that the police could protect them, but the knowledge of John's existence hung over him like a dark cloud. After dinner, Jaden retreated to his room, his thoughts racing. He sat at his desk, staring at his phone, scrolling through the screenshots of the messages between Miss Karen and John. His stomach twisted as he reread the words. Almost there. Just a little more time. John had been counting on Miss Karen to gain full access to his family's finances. Now that she was gone, would John try to continue the plan without her? And if so, how? Jaden didn't know much about this man, but the little he had seen was enough to make him uneasy. He turned on his computer and began to search for any information he could find about Miss Karen's real identity. After she had left, his parents had shared some of the details the police had uncovered about her past. Miss Karen wasn't her real name. Her true name was Karen McCullough, and she had a history of working for wealthy families, each time disappearing with large sums of money before anyone realized what had happened. But this time, her plan had gone further. She hadn't just been after money. She had been planning to manipulate and control their family's entire estate, and John had been her accomplice. Jaden searched the internet for any mentions of John in relation to Karen McCullough, but there were no obvious connections. Whoever John was, he had been careful to stay in the shadows. Frustrated, Jaden leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. A soft knock on his door made him sit up. His dad peeked in, his expression a mix of concern and exhaustion. "Can I come in, Bud?" Jaden nodded, and his dad stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He sat on the edge of Jaden's bed, rubbing his hands together as though trying to figure out how to start. "I know this has been a lot," his dad finally said. "More than any kid your age should have to deal with." Jaden shrugged. "I just wanted to protect us. I didn't want anything bad to happen." His dad smiled sadly. "And you did. You protected us, Jaden. Your mom and I are so proud of you. But I can see that this is still eating at you. You're worried, aren't you?" Jaden nodded, unable to meet his dad's eyes. "What if John comes after us? What if Miss Karen comes back?" His dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We've talked to the police. They're keeping an eye on things. We've even upgraded the security system for the house. I promise you, Jaden, we're going to keep you and Sophia safe." Jaden bit his lip. "But what if that's not enough?" His dad paused, then stood up and walked over to him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Jaden, I know it's scary. I know you've been carrying a lot of this on your own, but you're not alone anymore. You've done your part. Now let us handle the rest. Trust me, we're not going to let anything happen to this family." Jaden looked up at his dad, wanting so badly to believe him. He managed a small nod, and his dad squeezed his shoulder before leaving the room, closing the door softly behind him. But even as the door clicked shut, Jaden's mind kept racing. He trusted his parents, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Something told him that John wouldn't just give up because Miss Karen had been caught. There was too much at stake. The next morning, Jaden woke to the sound of his phone vibrating on his nightstand. Groggily, he reached over and grabbed it, expecting to see a text from one of his friends or an alert from a game. But when he looked at the screen, his blood ran cold. A message from an unknown number flashed on his screen. "You think you've won, don't you? But it's not over yet. You and your family will pay." Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. He stared at the message, feeling his hands start to tremble. It had to be John. There was no other explanation. How had he gotten Jaden's number? And what did he mean by, "You and your family will pay"? He immediately ran to his parents' room, bursting through the door without knocking. His mom and dad, still in bed, sat up in alarm. "Jaden, what is it?" his mom asked, her voice filled with concern. Jaden didn't say anything. He just handed her his phone, his hands shaking. His mom took the phone, her eyes widening as she read the message. She passed it to his dad, who quickly got out of bed and grabbed his own phone. "Who sent this?" his dad asked, though the answer was already clear. "It's him," Jaden said, his voice trembling. "It's John. He found us." His mom got out of bed and wrapped her arms around Jaden, holding him tightly. "It's okay, Jaden. We're going to figure this out." His dad was already dialing the police, his voice calm but urgent as he explained the situation. "Yes, we need to report a direct threat," he said into the phone. "It's related to the case we filed earlier this week. My son just received a message from the man we believe is involved." Jaden's mind swirled with fear. If John knew his phone number, that meant he was watching them somehow. He must have known about Miss Karen's failure and was now trying to intimidate them into backing down. The police arrived an hour later, taking statements from Jaden and his parents. They assured them that they were taking the threat seriously and would increase patrols around their neighborhood. But even with the police presence, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The following days were filled with a tense, uneasy calm. The police kept them updated, but there was little progress in finding John. Miss Karen remained missing, and every day that passed without any news made Jaden feel more on edge. He avoided leaving the house unless absolutely necessary, and even when he did, he kept his phone close, constantly checking for any new messages from John. One afternoon, Jaden sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone in frustration. He had been searching for any sign of John, any clue that could help the police find him, but nothing came up. It was as though this man didn't exist. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, jolting Jaden from his thoughts. His mom, who had been working in the living room, called out, "Jaden, can you get that? It's probably the delivery." Jaden's stomach churned as he approached the door, his mind flashing to the threat from John. What if it wasn't a delivery? What if it was him? He hesitated, then slowly opened the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A man stood there, wearing a black jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Jaden's pulse quickened. He didn't recognize the man, but something about him felt off. "Hey, kid," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "I've got a package for you." Jaden's eyes darted to the man's hands. He wasn't holding any package. Fear surged through him and he slammed the door shut, locking it quickly. "Mom!" he yelled, running back toward the living room. "Mom, there's a man at the door!" His mom jumped up, rushing to the door just as the man outside started pounding on it. "Open the door!" the man shouted, his voice muffled through the wood. Jaden's mom grabbed her phone, dialing the police, her hands trembling. "We need help," she said into the phone, her voice frantic. "There's a man at our door. I think it's the same person who sent the threats." Jaden's heart raced as he stood beside his mom, listening to the man's angry shouts from outside. He could hear the sound of sirens in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. Finally, the pounding stopped. Jaden peered through the window, his heart still racing. The man was gone, but Jaden knew, deep down, that this was far from over. John had made his move, and now it was only a matter of time before he tried again. The sound of police sirens blaring outside the house became a strange comfort to Jaden as they grew louder, signaling that help had finally arrived. He stood by the window, his heart pounding, still shaken by the strange man who had pounded on the door minutes earlier. His mind was a whirlwind of fear, adrenaline, and confusion. Who was this man? Was it John? And more importantly, where had he gone? His mom stood beside him, phone in hand, speaking rapidly to the 911 operator as the first police car pulled up to their driveway. Within moments, 2 officers stepped out, cautiously approaching the front door. The man who had been banging on their door was nowhere in sight. Jaden's dad, having just rushed home after his mom called him, came into the living room, his face drawn and tense. He immediately took charge, wrapping his arm protectively around Jaden's shoulders. "Stay here," his dad said quietly to Jaden as he moved to the door. He opened it for the officers, explaining the situation. Jaden wanted to feel safe with the police around, but the encounter with the mysterious man had rattled him. This wasn't just about Miss Karen anymore. John was real, and he was actively pursuing their family. He wasn't going to give up. An officer stepped into the house, tall and stern, introducing himself as Officer Martin. "We've had patrols monitoring the area ever since the report about the threats," he said calmly. "We didn't spot the suspect when we arrived, but we'll continue the search. In the meantime, I recommend everyone stay inside and lock the doors. If you notice anything unusual, call us immediately." Jaden's dad nodded, his face grim. "We'll do that. But what about this man? How did he find us so easily?" Officer Martin exchanged a glance with his partner before answering. "It's likely he's been watching the house for some time now. We're going to do a sweep of the neighborhood and see if any of your neighbors noticed anything unusual. But I won't lie to you, it sounds like this individual is determined." Jaden's dad clenched his jaw but thanked the officers as they stepped out to conduct their sweep. Jaden watched them walk around the yard, their flashlights scanning the bushes and edges of the property. For a moment he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the police would find something, a clue, a lead. Maybe this whole nightmare would be over soon. But deep down, Jaden knew that hope was fleeting. Whoever this man was, he was careful. If he had the audacity to show up at their front door in broad daylight, he wasn't going to be easy to catch. The family sat together in the living room, the weight of the silence pressing down on them. Sophia, oblivious to the full gravity of the situation, sat curled up on the couch with a book, while Jaden, his parents, and the officers waited for any sign of the man. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Then, just as Jaden began to think the man had truly vanished, his phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "You won't be able to hide forever. I'll be back soon, and when I am, your family won't be safe." Jaden's stomach twisted in fear. His fingers trembled as he showed the message to his parents. His mom's face paled, and his dad clenched his fists, his expression a mix of fear and anger. "We need to show this to the police," his mom whispered, her voice shaky. Jaden's dad nodded, immediately calling Officer Martin back into the house. The officer read the message, his expression darkening as he did. "This confirms what we suspected," he said, pulling out his radio to alert his team. "He's still watching you. We're going to increase patrols and install temporary surveillance around the property." Jaden's mind raced as Officer Martin discussed the next steps with his parents. Whoever John was, he was escalating. And now that Miss Karen had failed in her plan, John was coming after them himself. But what was he after? The threats were vague, menacing. Did John want revenge for what happened to Miss Karen, or was he after something more? As the police officers continued their investigation, Jaden retreated to his room, needing a moment to think. His phone sat on the bed beside him, still displaying the threatening message. He stared at it for a long time, wondering what his next move should be. John clearly had no intention of stopping, and Jaden couldn't just sit around waiting for him to make the next move. He needed to take action, to figure out who John really was and what he wanted. The police were doing everything they could, but Jaden felt like he was the only one who fully understood the danger they were in. He had been the one to uncover Miss Karen's lies, and now he felt it was his responsibility to stop John too. But how? As he sat there, thinking about everything that had happened, an idea began to form in his mind. Miss Karen had been in contact with John through her phone. He had seen the messages. What if there was more on her phone, something the police hadn't found yet? Miss Karen had always been secretive, but she couldn't have deleted everything. If he could somehow get access to her phone, maybe he could find more information about John. Something the police missed. But there was a problem. Miss Karen had taken her phone with her when she left. She had probably been careful enough to erase most of the evidence, but Jaden knew that nothing was ever truly erased. There had to be a way to retrieve the data. Maybe a backup or something she had saved on the cloud. Jaden's fingers hovered over the keyboard of his computer, hesitating for a moment before he started typing. He searched for any clues on how to recover deleted data from phones. It didn't take long to find articles and forums discussing ways to retrieve information from phones even after it had been deleted. It would be tricky, but not impossible. But first, he needed to figure out where Miss Karen had gone. He started searching online, using every trick he could think of. He searched her real name, Karen McCullough, hoping to find any records or recent activity that might lead him to her whereabouts. But like before, there was little information available. Whoever Miss Karen really was, she had been careful to cover her tracks. Frustration welled up inside him, but Jaden refused to give up. He thought back to everything he had learned about her, every detail she had let slip during her time in their home. There had to be something, some clue he had missed. And then he remembered something. One night, not long after Miss Karen had started working for them, Jaden had overheard her on the phone, talking to someone in hushed tones. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it. It had seemed like a private conversation, nothing more. But now, the memory stood out clearly in his mind. She had mentioned a place. He couldn't remember exactly what she had said, but it was something about a hotel. Could that be where she had gone? It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. Jaden quickly searched for hotels in the area. He didn't have much to go on, but he figured that Miss Karen wouldn't have gone far. She would have needed to stay nearby to keep an eye on them, especially if John was still working with her. He compiled a list of the hotels within a 20-mile radius and started calling them, one by one. "Hi, I'm looking for someone who might be staying at your hotel," Jaden said nervously into the phone, hoping the person on the other end wouldn't ask too many questions. "Her name is Karen McCullough. Has she checked in recently?" The receptionist on the other end of the line paused for a moment before replying. "Sorry, we can't give out that information." Jaden hung up, feeling his frustration grow. He tried 3 more hotels, each time receiving the same response. But just as he was about to give up, the 4th hotel gave him a lead. "Karen McCullough?" the receptionist repeated. "She checked in a few days ago, but she's already checked out." Jaden's heart raced. He had found her. Miss Karen had been staying at the hotel just a few miles from their home, watching them, planning her next move. But now she was gone, and Jaden had no idea where she had gone next. He thanked the receptionist and hung up, his mind whirling with possibilities. Miss Karen was on the move, but she hadn't gone far. John was still out there, and he was watching them, waiting for his chance to strike. Jaden knew he couldn't stop. He had to stay ahead of them, to figure out what their next move was before it was too late. As night fell, Jaden lay in bed, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. He couldn't sleep, his mind too restless with fear and anticipation. Every sound outside his window made his heart race. Every passing car felt like a threat. His phone buzzed again, and his stomach dropped. Another message from the unknown number. "You can't run forever. I'll see you soon." Jaden's blood ran cold. John was getting closer, he could feel it. But Jaden wasn't going to run. He was going to fight back. The chilling message on Jaden's phone stared back at him, as if the words were pulsing with threat. "You can't run forever. I'll see you soon." Jaden lay in bed, his heart hammering in his chest, every nerve on edge. He knew now, without a doubt, that John was coming for them. The man had gone from being a shadowy figure lurking behind the scenes to a direct and immediate threat. Jaden's mind raced. What did John want? Was it revenge for Miss Karen's failed scheme, or something more sinister? One thing was certain. John was playing a game, a dangerous one, and now it was Jaden's turn to make his move. Sitting up, he grabbed his phone and quickly typed out a message to his parents, who were still awake downstairs, discussing the recent police activity and increased patrols around the neighborhood. "I just got another message from John. I think we need to come up with a plan." A moment later, his mom responded, "Come down, let's talk." Jaden didn't waste time. He threw on his hoodie and padded quietly downstairs. His parents were sitting at the kitchen table, faces tense, and his dad had a folder full of papers spread out in front of him. Sophia was already asleep, unaware of the growing danger that lurked just outside their home. "Another message?" his dad asked, looking up from his paperwork. His voice was filled with a mix of worry and exhaustion. Jaden nodded, handing over his phone. His mom read the message first, her face pale under the harsh kitchen light. "We need to stop this man, whatever it takes." "We can't keep waiting for him to make the next move," Jaden said, the urgency in his voice clear. "He's not going to stop. We need to get ahead of him." His dad sat back, considering. "What are you thinking, Jaden?" Jaden swallowed, trying to gather his thoughts. He knew this was risky, but they had no other option. "We need to set a trap for him." Both his parents stared at him, surprise and concern etched on their faces. "A trap?" his mom repeated. Jaden nodded. "John keeps sending these messages, right? He's watching us, and he's making it clear that he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. But we don't know what his endgame is. The police can only do so much. What if we lure him out? Make him come to us?" His dad rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Lure him out? How do you plan to do that?" Jaden had been thinking about this ever since the second message came through. "We pretend like we're leaving the house for a few days, like we're giving up and going into hiding. We let him think the house will be empty, no security, no one around." His mom's eyes widened. "You're suggesting we make the house look vulnerable?" "Yes," Jaden said firmly. "We give him a reason to come here, make him think it's safe to make his move. But instead of an empty house, we'll have the police waiting for him. We'll set up surveillance cameras inside. We'll be ready." His dad leaned forward, clearly intrigued but wary. "That's a dangerous plan, Jaden. What if something goes wrong? What if he brings backup or finds out we're setting him up?" Jaden's heart raced, but he knew they couldn't wait any longer. "I know it's risky, but it's better than sitting around waiting for him to strike. We don't even know what he's planning. If we don't do something now, he could catch us off guard." His parents exchanged a long look. Jaden could tell they were torn between wanting to protect him and realizing that his plan might be their best shot at stopping John. His mom was the first to speak. "If we're going to do this, we need to be careful. The police will have to be involved and we'll need a solid plan, no taking chances." Jaden nodded. "I agree. We don't do this without the police." His dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right. Let's talk to the officers tomorrow. If they're on board, we'll go through with it. But Jaden, you need to understand, this is dangerous. If anything feels off, we pull the plug. No risks, okay?" "Okay," Jaden agreed, though inside he knew they were already in too deep to turn back. The next morning, after a restless night, Jaden and his parents met with Officer Martin and his team. The officers listened intently as Jaden explained the plan. They exchanged glances, clearly considering the risks. "It's a bold idea," Officer Martin said, folding his arms as he leaned against the kitchen counter. "But you're right. John is watching, and if we can draw him out, we might have a chance to catch him. We'll need to set up a decoy, make it look like you're leaving town, leaving the house unprotected." One of the other officers, a woman named Officer Rivera, nodded in agreement. "We'll station plainclothes officers nearby, ready to move in as soon as John takes the bait. We'll also need to wire the house with cameras and mics, so we can monitor everything in real time." Jaden's dad spoke up. "What about my son and daughter? I don't want them anywhere near this when it happens." "Of course," Officer Martin assured him. "You'll take your kids somewhere safe, maybe a family member's house or even a hotel for the night. We'll make sure John thinks the house is empty." Jaden's mom squeezed his hand. "This is our best chance to stop him, Jaden. But we have to be smart. We'll do this right, and we'll be safe." That evening, the Matthews family began putting the plan into motion. They packed up suitcases, making a show of preparing to leave the house. Jaden noticed how careful his dad was to leave certain lights on, making it look like they were leaving in a hurry, not bothering to turn everything off. Jaden had to admit his parents and the police were good at making the setup look convincing. He knew that John had to be watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They had to make him believe that this was it, that this was his chance to get what he wanted. Officer Martin and his team installed hidden cameras and microphones in key areas of the house, making sure every room was covered. They placed a plainclothes officer in a van parked inconspicuously down the street, ready to monitor the feeds from the cameras and coordinate the officers positioned nearby. By the time the sun set, everything was in place. "We're ready," Officer Rivera said quietly as she adjusted her earpiece. "Now we wait." Jaden and his family left the house, following the police instructions exactly as planned. They drove to a hotel in the next town over, where they would stay the night. Jaden couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety growing in his stomach as they checked in. What if John didn't fall for the trap? What if he was smarter than they thought? His mom knelt down beside him as they entered their hotel room. "It's going to be okay, Jaden. You've done so much to protect us already. Now it's time for the police to do their part." Jaden nodded, but the tension in his chest didn't ease. He couldn't stop thinking about what was happening back at their house. John was out there somewhere, and soon he would make his move. As the night wore on, Jaden lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner. His phone buzzed, and for a split second, his heart raced as he imagined another message from John. But it wasn't from John. It was a message from Officer Martin. "We've got movement at the house. Stay put." Jaden's pulse quickened. It was happening. John was making his move. He sat up in bed, clutching his phone tightly, waiting for more information. His parents were awake too, sitting tensely on the edge of the bed, waiting for news. Minutes passed like hours. Jaden's mind raced with thoughts of what might be happening. Were the police going to catch him? Was John dangerous enough to fight back? Was he alone? Finally, another message came through. "Suspect has entered the house. Officers are moving in." Jaden's breath caught in his throat. They had him. John had taken the bait, just as they had planned. He glanced over at his parents, who were also reading the message on their phones. His dad let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. His mom pulled Jaden into a tight hug. "They've got him," she whispered. But Jaden couldn't relax just yet. He knew this wasn't over until John was in handcuffs. Until then, anything could happen. The minutes ticked by as they waited for confirmation that John had been caught. Jaden's mind raced through all the possibilities. What if something went wrong? What if John managed to escape? Just as his nerves threatened to overwhelm him, his phone buzzed again. "Suspect in custody. It's over." Jaden let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. John had been caught. It was finally over. His parents hugged him tightly, and for the first time in days, Jaden felt the weight of fear start to lift off his shoulders. But even as relief washed over him, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. John had been caught, but what about Miss Karen? She was still out there, somewhere. And Jaden had a feeling she wouldn't be giving up so easily. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new exciting stories. Click on the bell to be notified about every new video, and be sure to check out our other stories which will definitely not leave you indifferent.